next we have Shannon from the Trobe University. Shannon is a front-end developer working at the Trobe in the position of coordinator, website and applications within the library's digital discovery team. He is currently applying his expertise in UI and UX design to update some of the library's online offerings, including Primo, with the aim of improving how users interact with them. So, for his presentation today, guided tours in Primo. Shannon, I'll pass over to you as soon as you're ready. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Sean. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I'm just going to share my screen now. All right, so first off, I'd just like to acknowledge all First Peoples on the lands which we live and work, and I celebrate their enduring knowledge and connection to country. I honour the wisdom of and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be with us here today. So as mentioned, today I will be talking about implementing guided tours in Primo. And to get started, I just kind of wanted to touch on basically how it all came about, or at least how this project came about at the Trobe. And basically, we just wanted to update the design of Primo and tweak some of its functionality, which, as you can imagine, is fairly standard with software and websites. But this did mean there would be a change to how users view Primo and interact with it. And it also meant that the existing support material, like the guides and the screen recordings, they would all of a sudden be out of date. So ideally, this support material would be updated to reflect our changes. But maybe that isn't ideal, because if you have supporting material in multiple formats and multiple locations, and sometimes potentially there's different teams like learning services or academics that have their own guides, then the process of reviewing and updating these support materials can be a large task. And because of this, you may be hesitant to make changes to your system. So ideally, there would actually be less reliance on external support material. And instead, we include some of this information within the system itself. And as you probably guessed, judging by the title of this presentation, this is where we can utilize guided tours. So just quickly, what is a guided tour? In its simplest form, it highlights elements and provides information about them. So if you liken it to being on holidays and seeing some sites and you actually have a tour guide, you may walk along, tour guide points something out, tells you something about it, then you continue walking, they point out something else, tell you about that, and so on. The difference in this context is ours would be in platform, so it would actually be within Primo's interface and would have dynamic highlighting. And I'll touch on what that dynamic highlighting is later. It's self-paced, so the user can sort of navigate forward and back within it, however suits them. And usually you would have it as opt-in. So it's there if they need, but you're not forcing it down their throat. And guided tours, they're really useful to introduce key features on the interface, or even to step through a process within a product. So how do we get this functionality? Well, luckily, there are quite a few JavaScript libraries already available. So it is kind of just a matter of choosing one. Some examples are Intro.js, Shepherd, Driver.js, and Hopscotch. So you would really, I'd recommend just checking out, there are more, but these are some of the main or more popular ones. So I would have a look at their features and what's involved and just compare it to the requirements of your own project. I chose Driver.js for my work, mainly because it's lightweight with no dependencies. It's built in just vanilla JavaScript. I found it easy to use and to customize. It's accessible and includes focus trapping, which means when you're in a step, users can't shift focus outside of that step to other elements that may be on the page. And it's also MIT licensed. So free to use, even commercially, with the option to donate. And I'm just going to have a quick look at driver.js, and you can see it's just driver.js.com is where you'd go if you wanted to download it to try things out. And we can just have a look at a quick demo. So you can see it highlights element on the page. Really, it's got an overlay that makes everything else darker, but makes that one stand out. And we've got this little panel with the information and the navigation controls. So you can just kind of move along and it shifts where the highlight is to give information about the next elements, even moving down the page to items further down. So that's driver.js. So what might this look like in Primo? So let's have a look. This is Latrobe's instance of Primo. I would just point out that we're using Primo Explore, but the content I'm talking about today, we set that up in the customization package. And from what I understand, it's treated sort of the same between Primo Explore and Primo VE. So it should work for both instances. So if you notice, we've got this button in the top corner here, Tour the Library Collection search page. So that's the button that we use to launch the tour. Just got a little welcome panel, and then we kind of step around between some elements on the page, giving some information. So that's just a quick look of what it could look like. So the question of how we get that functionality in Primo, really it's as simple as, loading the CSS and the JavaScript from the library into the customization package. So when I say that, I'm talking about the custom.js file within the customization package. And this is the little snippet of code to get the actual library in there. So if we just have a quick look at this, this first check is just testing whether the driver object is defined. So if it's not, then we use Angular load to load the CSS and also to load the JavaScript. And then we have a function so that when the JavaScript's finished loading, then this is called, and we just set up the guided tour. So the library is available, and then we just use it in the other function. And then if the if driver was already defined, then there's no need to reload the CSS and the script. So that's why it would jump down to the else and just go straight to setting up the guided tour. So if we have a quick look at the code for this, this is the component part. So we're sort of using the PRM top bar after element. The controller is the guided tour controller that we define down here. And this is our template HTML, which is really just the link for the button. It looks big, but really all of this is just the SVG of the icon, the little road sign that appears in the button. And if we have a quick look in Primo, just inspect up here, the top nav, you can see we're inside the PRM top bar. There's top bar before, top bar after is what we did. Expand that. And you see there's our A with ID to a button. So that's the button that we added there. So here is, so in the controller, we're just in the init function. That's where we've set up, to load the scripts and the CSS. And these are just some variables we use elsewhere. One important thing to know, or, when you're setting this up in Primo, is it's not without some considerations. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Primo and the many aspects of it. So it's not, as with most things, it's not just a simple case of, put in a chunk of code and everything's all hunky-dory. So the first consideration is that Primo has quite a few different views. You've got the standard collection search, and then the search results of that, database search, database results, and then you've got all the other different types of search results, the favorites and the My Account and their tabs within it. So just looking there, we've actually got 20 views, and I may not have accounted for all of them. But of course, you don't have to set up a guided tour for each of these. Just the ones you choose. If there's a screen that is fairly straightforward, you don't think the user actually needs guidance, then you can leave that out. Or in our case, the My account, it does have multiple tabs, but we've just got a single guided tour that gives just an overview. So it doesn't go into the detail of the content of each tab, but it just says the loans, this is where you would do X, Y, and Z. So it's really up to you how far you take that. But yeah, the fact that there are so many of them, it does mean that you can't just have a single guided tour that covers all of the possible views within Primo. So how do we take the views into account? We do this by listening for changes to the view and updating the tour accordingly. And the snippet of code for that is here, where we're setting up a listener function for the location change start event. So when this event fires, it calls our function, we get the event object, we get the current URL, but we also get the next URL. So that's for the view that it's going to. So that when this happens, we then update the tour based on the next URL. So the next view. So if we have a look at this in action, first we'll look at the code. So like I said, after we've loaded the script, we go to the setup guided tour. In here, we initialize the driver object and set up some of its configuration variables. But this part here is what was pictured. It's where we set up the listener to the location change start. And you can see here I've added a trace so that it will print out the value of next to the console on each change. I'll also point out down here, we've got another call to update the tour. This one is what would be fired when you first load the page, because when you load the page, this event won't fire because we're not changing the location. It's just the initial location. So this is the first update, but then when you navigate within Angular, then it's going to fire this event and it's going to use this call to update tour. But for right now, if we have a look in Primo and check for this trace, so we'll go to the console. So right now we're just in the library collections. But if we went to say database, you can see here location change start next, and this is the URL where it headed to. So you can see DB search down here, and this matches what's up in the URL up above. So if we move around newspaper, you'll see NP search, browse. There's also favorites and also the My account. So we can actually get each of these the URLs for where we're headed. So once we know where it's headed, we can then update the tour guide. The really good thing about this is that, say if I go to the favorites, is that basically whenever the location changes, like even when you're changing tabs in favorites, wherever this event is heard, that's potentially a location where we can add a guided tour and like a context specific one for what's being shown. Like I said earlier, you don't have to do one for all of them if you don't want, but it's the capability. You have the option using that listener to do that. So updating the tour, like I mentioned, we essentially just check the URL where we're moving to, and then that helps us decide which tour to use. So this is the snippet of code, and here I'm using regular expressions just to do a simple test for text within the URL. So this first instance, I'm just searching for /search ? Which is just the standard library search. So /search ? We're just looking for that part of the URL there. Down here, you can see similar searches for DB search, so database, newspaper, journals, browse, full display, My account, and favorites. And then if none of these strings are in the URL, then we're setting our tour label to null. And when that's null, it will hide the button So then, for example, if you didn't want a guide for browse, you could just remove that case right there. And because it's not listed, sets to a guide to null, and then that button just won't be displayed when the user goes to the browse screen. You may also notice we've got inside the search, we've got query, like another regular expression search. So this is, just to tell when you're actually looking at a result view from the standard search as opposed to the homepage. So for example, in standard library, you got search here, but if you just search for a word, you can see up in the URL, we've got search question mark, but we also have query. So we know that we're looking at the search results of that search. And whether you noticed or not, in the button too, the text changed. So now we're touring the library collections search results page. So previously it was just the search page, but that text changed, so it's now the search results page. And if we launch this tour, it's actually a different tour where it points at the elements on the search, on this search results screen. So yeah, that's fairly handy where we can just set up the tour steps that we need, the different guides, depending on what those URLs are. Another consideration to take into account is that we need to cater for both desktop and mobile views. Some elements that are usually just on the screen will actually move to the three-dot menu on a mobile. For example, the advanced search, my account, and the report a problem button. And some options they're shown differently. They're either like toggled to be shown rather than just being on the screen. I'll just give a quick demo of this. If we look at the advanced search, if you sort of came into where it's on the mobile, that link is gone. Instead, advanced search is here. And similarly, we've got our facets, our filters on the left. But when you come into mobile view, you have to toggle that with that button there. So those are two changes that, between desktop view and mobile view. So you do have to factor that in. So if you think back to the 20 screens that I showed previously, those screens plus the mobile versions, we're now up to like 40. So how do you factor that in within the code? One handy thing I sort of found one thing that I use to do this, if we go up and look at the Primo Explore element, you can see the classes here. They're based on the current width of the browser. So if I move the browser in, you'll see these changes. These classes are actually changing to reflect what it currently is. You've got _LG for large, _medium, medium, and then it'll go to small. And then I'll actually separate this so that we can still see it. Here, when it changes to mobile view, which is right about here, it's got the class _XS, so extra small. So we can kind of tell when it's in mobile view by seeing whether or not the Primo Explore tag has the _XS class. And just move that back in. So if we look at the code again, and this time I'll go to the update tour. So in here, we've got this check here. So the variable is mobile view. We're just looking if the Primo Explorer, if it has that class XS, because if it doesn't, then the query selector is not going to select something, you're going to get null. So is mobile view will be true if we're in that mobile view, and false if we're on desktop view. So where we would use that, I'll show you first an example here in the standard search. In the standard search, the second item highlighted is this three-dot menu. Now, when you go to the mobile view, this isn't it. That's the three-dot menu that's normally there, but mobile view, it's this, it's still a three-dot menu, three-dot button, but it's actually a different element. So it's got a different class, and you would select it a different way. The tour on this page hasn't been updated because I just resized the window, but I haven't actually reloaded the page or navigated anywhere. So it hasn't called that update tour. So when it set up this tour, it was in desktop view. So now you can go, to the next step, and it's not pointing at anything because the button that it was pointing at isn't on the page anymore. If I go previous and then back out and go next, that's the button it's pointing at. But mobile view, nothing to point at. Whereas if we just refresh this so that it does the update tour, sees that it's in mobile view, instead, it's going to point to this button here. And how we did that in here, because I used that flag, when I actually set up the tour steps, this is the first step, which isn't attached to an element, it's just the introduction one. But this is the second one, that's for the 3-dot menu. So you can see here, when it's the mobile view, it's going to use this selector, and that selector is for this button. But when that's false, it will use this selector. And that was the other menu button, this one here. So we can kind of, use this functionality just to change what we're highlighting. So that way it'll kind of highlight the equivalent element on mobile or desktop. One other issue with this to consider, like I showed you before, the advanced search actually moves when it's in mobile view. So if we go, it's after the search, it goes to advanced search, which, all well and good. But when you go mobile view, advanced search isn't there. It's up here, hidden. So if I refresh this so that it's in the mobile tour, go next. So it's after this one. What it actually does, opens the menu and highlights it. So when you go back, it closes it. And just when you move between these two steps, it'll open that menu and highlight the element because now it's there. Now it's in the menu, we're showing it. And how we did that, if we looked down here, this is a step with the search form. We set a function on next click. So instead of it just moving to the next step, it's going to call this function. And in this function, we're checking if it's a mobile view. If it is, we want to open that menu. So basically, I select that the menu button. So I'm actually getting this button here and triggering its click. And that's what brings out the menu. And then I've set a timeout just to give it time to open so that the elements are actually there. And then I just move to the next step. And the next step is mobile view, and then that's the that one there is the advanced search within the menu, whereas this is the selector for when it's in desktop view. And similarly, this one has a on prev click. So when you go back, it's going to trigger the close button to close that menu, and then it'll go back to this step where it selects the search form. One thing that I just remembered I mentioned is the dynamic highlighting. So basically I'm talking about this highlighting here where, I don't have to set the width and height and its location and all that. That's done by the tour guide, the guided tour library. So for example, if we bring this in, you can see the highlight area is actually changing to suit that element. So that's one good thing that the library just takes care of. And so for example, if we made some changes to the design, like I'll just make some real simple ones here, move it down and set a max width to say 400 pixels. So we moved it down and we made it smaller. And, but because it's dynamic, it fits. It's in the location, it fits. So you could do like minor design things and you don't have to worry about updating the guided tour. If you change the ID or the class or something that you use to select that element, then yes, you have to update that. But if you're just doing visual changes, moving things around or resizing, then it's really handy. You don't need to update the guided tour. All right, let's move on to the third consideration. And this is similar to the second one in that some elements that you want to highlight in your guided tour, um, they won't actually be there. So for example, as pictured, the suggested databases, they're shown for some searches, but not all. There's also, yeah, the instances where the user has done a search and don't actually get any results. There are some options that are only there when you signed in. And there's, yeah, the chance that the tour started before the page content actually loaded. For example, if I search for psychology, you'll see the button updates, and then sometime later, then we get our results. So given that the first element in this one is one of these result items, had I started this while it was loading, that element wouldn't be there, wouldn't be able to highlight it. So yeah, so how do you combat this one? So you could add some JavaScript logic to check what's on that page and adjust your tour accordingly. And yeah, you could even skip steps depending on what elements are and aren't there. But I wouldn't actually recommend skipping steps. For example, if the user's search didn't show any suggested databases and you skip the step that talked about that, then when they next perform a search, perhaps they will get some suggested databases. And because they've already done the tour, they may not do it again. So that way they don't actually see the content about those suggested databases. So yeah, they would actually miss out on that content. So an easier way to combat this issue, and it's the method I've been trying to use, is really just to use language in the tour that makes sense regardless of whether the highlighted element is there or not. So for example, instead of saying something like, here are the results of your search, you might just say, the results of your search are listed on the page. That way, if the user didn't actually get results, then they know had there been some, they'd be listed on the page, and they won't be like looking around the page like where is here. So there are probably, oh, I'm sure, a lot more considerations to take into account, but these are the three main ones that I thought I'd cover. If there's time, and we are cutting close, so I will go really quickly on this. Just talk about, you can have additional guides. So for example, I've got these tour guides, which just kind of show elements around the screen, but in advanced search, I've also got one specifically for the advanced search. So if I launch this one, it's just about what's in the advanced search. So it's more detailed than what was covered in the full page one. So yeah, just wanted you to be aware that you can have the multiple ones going, one like a general purpose, and then you can have like specialized ones. And as mentioned earlier, you could actually do like a process, like steps in a process, like step one, do this, step two, do that, whatever, if you're using like a use case to show how something would be done. So yeah, that was fairly quick, but yeah, I will move on to any questions.
Thanks, Shannon. That was really good and very interesting. We have one question posted to the chat so far from Andy. Do you have any data on how much the chore button has been used so far?
So far, it's 0 because it's not live. But yes, we are looking into the analytics of it. Currently, the Primo, like the standard Primo analytics won't, from what I understand, at least for the Primo Explorer, doesn't track just link clicks. It only really tracks the the functions within Primo. For example, just quickly looking at the network traffic, if you collapse and expand, you can see calls are being made, that are being tracked, even the reported problem tracked. Whereas if you click a link, which is essentially what the tour guide is, there's nothing that came down. So it is something we're sort of aware of, but essentially at this point, it looks like you'd need to incorporate like Google Analytics or something on top of Primo's native analytics. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, thanks for that, Shannon. It doesn't look like we've got any more questions, so I will pass it back to Sean.
Excellent.
Right, great.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you.
And Shannon, thank you very much for the detail. Whenever anyone busts up DevTools in the middle of the session, I think that's always a cause for excitement as well too. So that was really cool.